All right, well, the training camp tour continues. You know the phrase, how great is ball? It doesn't get much better than this time of the year. And doesn't get much better than working with producer Michael Molinari, one of the most talented guys in the biz. He's seen multiple sports. We're talking NBA, college football, highest levels, every element of production. And he's called some of the biggest upsets in history, a la Stanford SC when I was on the staff at SC. So we're going to put that to the side, but we're going to bring Michael in because we just finished watching USC practice and been bouncing around the Pac-12 for the last couple of weeks. Was watching their big scrimmage where all three quarterbacks dueled it out with Michael, Coach Aliotti. It was a pretty fun session. But overall, before we get his take on the Trojans, I want to dive into Mike's background just to set the stage a little bit. Mike, first off, welcome to the show. Secondly, what's your favorite podcast? And thirdly, why did you get into this racket?
I love sports and I love TV, and I unfortunately knew I wasn't going to be playing professional sports. I knew that early, so I said maybe the next best thing is going to some great events and covering them in the television truck, which is a nice team aspect in TV that I'm sure we'll get into later, but that's why I did it, to continue my sports career past the high school zenith that it was.
So a lot of college football fans, they watch games, of course, and they get to know the people broadcasting on the field, of course, the characters that play. But there's an architect behind all of that. And I like to liken that to the people in the truck, you being in the lead seat as the producer. How do you, because you get asked a lot by student athletes, aspiring people in the entertainment business who love sports, how do you describe your job and your craft?
I think most people are familiar with a director in the movies. You're sort of the creative force behind the camera, the storyteller behind the camera. In live sports TV, there's actually two people that do that job. The director, who I work with, Scott Barkey, who I work with every week, is in charge of the moment, the now. He covers what's happening at that moment. The producer's in charge of the past, the replays, and the future, what we're going to do out of the commercial, what's the next thing we're doing. So that's two people working as one to get us through the show. We lead, depending on the show. Our football show has about 40 to 50 people working on it, besides the three announcers everybody sees. There's another 47 or so behind the camera doing a multitude of jobs, the cameramen, the replay operators, the graphics, the sound people. So it's a huge group of people that gets the show you watch at home on the air.
So the show we watch at home, I mean, so much of the game that fans love is just the pageantry that just naturally plays out. For somebody who's the quote-unquote director, like people know in the movies, for a game, what's the balance between being able to direct the game or watching what people are embracing and you know, really receiving as a viewer, versus if they just went to the game and watched it from the stands?
Well, I think obviously what you miss when you go to a game is the replays and the commentary from the announcers. So obviously that's what we provide in the truck. We provide the replays, we provide graphics. We give you extra than being at the game. Obviously being at the game, you have that whole pageantry that we try to bring to you as well. But I think a lot of people say the best seat in the house is being at home on their couch instead of being at the game. I think you could have two sides of that argument, but my job is to make the best seat in the house your couch at home.
You've sat in a lot of seats and brought a lot of shows to people's couches. What about college football do you love so much?
I love that pageantry I just mentioned. That's one thing. That's what I love about college more than the pros necessarily, and the stories. Every year we just went to a practice and there were 4 or 5 stories that I just learned at that practice that I hope we can bring to people when we cover that game. And that's meeting new people, hearing new stories. I think that's the best part about the college game overall versus the pro game.
All right, so I joked in the open saying we wouldn't talk about it, but we're definitely going to. You produced the epic game. Harbaugh, Coach Carroll, a reference, I was on that staff. What is that like? Because there's a lot of SC fans listening to this, and as a USC season preview coming off of their scrimmage. What was that like for you in the truck as that was happening and unfolding?
Well, I'll tell you first, the week up to that game, all I'm thinking about is what are we going to do when it's a 30-point blowout to entertain people watching this game. So I had probably 10 fun things. None of them made the air. And there's no one more happy than me about that, because none of that extra stuff we had made the air because the game was so compelling from the moment it started. There's two moments I remember. Just before Stanford hits the winning touchdown pass, I say to everybody, all right, if this happens, no one get excited. Let's keep our cool and let's just cover the game. And when that touchdown was caught, the entire truck jumps up screaming and yelling because it was just too overwhelming. Just emotion took over, which is pretty rare. But that was one I remember. The emotion just completely took over. Everybody lost it for a few seconds. And then we got back to business. The other thing I remember is Lewis Johnson, who I still work with here at Pac-12 Network, was determined to get Jim Harbaugh for an interview. And Jim Harbaugh had run off the field, and Lewis Johnson, who not many people know was a long distance or middle distance runner in his heyday, spotted him at like the gate, sprinted across the field, got to him, and immediately we threw it to him. Anyone else would be completely out of breath, but Lewis, with his pedigree, was able to just get the question out, let Jim ask another question. It was one of the great gets of all time to get that interview we needed to get. Those are two things that jump out at me from that.
You know, you've taught me a lot in my broadcasting career, and something that we've often talked about is, let the game tell the story. As that one was unfolding that night, what's going through your mind as all of a sudden it gets into the fourth quarter and all of a sudden SC doesn't convert on a third down and Stanford gets the ball and can drive? Like, how are the wheels turning in a producer's head who's always thinking about the 40 plus people that you work with and a couple steps ahead of what may or may not happen?
Well, I think you said let the game tell the story, but what is just identifying the story? I think the thing that really makes a good show, a great show in moments like that, is we call them the loser shots. So the shots of the USC, there was an incredible shot of two USC fans reacting to that Stanford touchdown that John McDonough, who's not with us anymore, but great director, was great at getting those shots of the losers. And those fans, that reaction to that touchdown told the whole story. You didn't need to know anything about football to know the monumental upset had happened because of the way they reacted. So I think it's sometimes the producer needs to stay out of the way of the announcers and the director. Sometimes the producer needs to say, hey, here's a story we got to get in. Like, we got to get that Harbaugh interview. So through my mind was make sure, because there's a play you'll remember, not many in the audience will. There was a review on a fourth down play that Stanford got a first down late in that drive, and we had the shots the refs needed to get that call correct. And at least we had the shots they needed to determine what they wanted to determine. But I was proud that we had the right shots for that moment, because that's where the TV needs to make sure they're covering the game.
Wow. Lots there. I remember that night like yesterday. There was a quarterback for USC. His name's John David Booty. And John David, he had also foregone his senior year of high school to go to USC early in his collegiate career. Doesn't start as a freshman or sophomore. Leinert's there, and all of a sudden he gets the job. And that night, he breaks a finger in his throwing hand. And I'll never forget being on the sideline with him and being on the headsets and the coach being, what's he like? What's it like? How's his finger? Because we had Mark Sanchez, who was a huge recruit, but hadn't played a lot of football yet. And talking to talking to JD about his finger. Do you remember that in the game of, it looked like he must have hit it on a helmet or something along those lines? And how did you guys look at that storyline? Because eventually he ended up throwing a pick because he couldn't get the ball to come out of his hand properly because he did break, I believe it was his pointer finger.
I know we had shots of the shaking of the hand, and that's, as you know, trying to get injury information from a sideline can be incredibly difficult. And at the same time, you want to try to cover, but you don't want to speculate. And I think we had the right balance of, it looks like there's something wrong with his hand. We can show you he's shaking it, but we can't get any information. So it's a little bit of speculation there without trying to make a determination. You can only say what you see. Yeah. Unfortunately. You remember they had a backup quarterback on the other side too, Tavita.
Yeah. Tavita Pritchard, who's now the Andrew Luck director of offense, aka offensive coordinator. at Stanford right now, and looking forward to watching them this year. Okay, so we just left USC in their scrimmage. Let's transition, because you and I are going to be working week 1. Ted Robinson, Jill Savage, Scott Barkey, your crew of 40-plus people at the Collie on the Pac-12 Networks cannot wait for September 1st and the season to kick off for the first weekend of college football. But a quarterback that is getting talked about a ton, will get talked about a ton after this scrimmage, is JT Daniels. Also missed and reclassified his senior year of high school, very similar to John David Booty in the aforementioned conversation. What did you see from JT Daniels, and what jumped out at you today watching the Trojans for the first time this training camp?
Well, I'm not an analyst like you, but what jumped out at me was when he took the field, the offense looked completely different. They didn't move the ball at all until he got in there, and then he hit his high school teammate and roommate, St. Brown. I think, what was it? I don't know, over 30-yard pass, and then the touchdown, maybe a pass or two later. And those two look like they picked up right where they left off in high school. So that was pretty impressive. The other thing, being right on the sideline, which I don't get a chance to do much, you could really hear his cadence and the confidence in his voice. And for a kid that should be a senior in high school right now, it's pretty impressive the way he led that team, at least vocally, and the confidence he sounded like from the sideline was pretty impressive to me too. The other nuance I picked up.
Yeah, I love that. I think my takeaway from practice, after going to the first week of training camp, the first few practices, seeing all 3 quarterbacks, that it was pretty even, just getting started. Today, situationally, it was 2 minute, it was third down, we were just playing football in drives, and when JT came in, he just had a feel about him, as you referenced. You said aura. He's got a moxie to him that is used to playing with big-time players. I mean, I'm on this training camp tour now, and you go to Cal, one of their top receivers played at his high school. You go across the street to UCLA. I mean, they've got so many talented players that he played with. And I say that because, and I talked to J.D. Booty about coming in as an early enrollee, missing your senior year of high school. He said the biggest thing is, how are you around guys? How are you around big personalities, 4 or 5 star recruits? And I think JT, his personality fits right in, and his play fits right in. It's like he thinks that he already belongs versus having to prove that he already belongs. And I think that's a subtle difference. Matt Fink, Jack Sears had their moments where they flashed. You'd assume right now they know the system better than JT, but to me, the next 7 days are going to be the most critical for this program coming into week 1 of they got to start cutting some reps from one of those 3 quarterbacks just to prepare guys game plan wise, Mike. So I can't wait. I think it's too early to predict because there were some plays where JT, he looked awesome, but maybe made the wrong read or took too long. But overall, I mean, he will be the future of this program when I think we're going to find out next week.
I was just going to add, you cannot fake confidence because people will pick up on that immediately. He has genuine confidence. That's what I noticed.
Yeah, I call it DQs, dude qualities. And I think that's when you walk into a room or a huddle or a sideline and people feel your presence, but then you make them better. You know, and we saw that. You referenced Amon-Ra St. Brown. I said it on our signing day show. I think he's the best receiver to enter this conference since Deshaun Jackson at Cal, over a decade ago. So I can't wait to see that duo, man.
That catch he made coming right at us, the goalpost right in his line of sight, and he didn't even flinch. And that's a scrimmage. It was very impressive. That was impressive. It was right at us, too. Real impressive.
Really natural player.
Aliotti didn't think it was a catch, though.
Yeah. Nick Aliotti and I disagreed over, is it a catch?
The DC said no catch. The former wide receiver said catch. What a shock.
I love it. All right, so I'm on the way to the airport here to go check out a couple other colleges. Mike, before we close here, what are you most excited about working at the Pac-12 Networks with this upcoming college football season?
I'm most excited about? I certainly hope this is the year that we get a team in and through the playoff. And I say we, I'm meaning the Pac-12. I think it's really important, and I think that after today and from everything I've read and seen about Washington last year, I think this year Washington's got a pretty good shot, and I'm excited about that because we play great football in the Pac-12, and I think we need a team to really break through to gain that respect nationally.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the thing I'm most looking forward to is the new faces. So whether that's the 5 new head coaches or whether it's the current head coaches evolving even more. I mean, think about the gift we got in the Pac-12 watching Clay Helton never been a head coach before, and evolved through the years to winning a Pac-12 championship last year, Rose Bowl the year before, and then the new faces on the field and the faces that the country doesn't know, whether that's Justin Herbert. Unfortunately, some may not even know Bryce Love that well, which is a sad embarrassment because I think he's the best running back in the country, and hopefully a lot of people would agree with that. And then who's going to be the quarterback at some of these other institutions, and the stars like N'Keal Harry taking another step. So this is it. We're getting off the exit here. I'm going to LAX. Yeah, I'm going American, I believe. I'm going to go check that. But Mike, thanks for joining it, man.
Oh, it was fun. It was fun. Thank you.
All right, there it is. Michael Molinari, producer extraordinaire of the Pac-12 Networks. The How Great Is Ball training camp tour rolls on. I'm going to keep giving you college football thoughts, insights, stories throughout the entire season. Some stories we have coming up, they're from coaches that will blow your mind, inspire you. Some will be players in these stories that you thought you knew, but they're the exact opposite. And some will just be analytical, like these training camp tours. So you know how we end it. The only limits that you have in life are the ones you set yourself. So enjoy training camp, and let me know your thoughts on the season, and feel free to subscribe, rate, review, and of course share. And if you've got a certain guest or you have a great story you want to pass along, be sure you hit me up on social media. I'm at Yogi Roth. All right, that's all for now. Off to the flight. Peace.